A world-shaking disaster occurred in Paris's Pont de l'Alma tunnel early on August 31, 1997. A horrific vehicle collision left the black Mercedes wrecked and its passengers in need of rescue. French fireman Xavier Gourmelon was one of the first responders, unaware of the enormous challenge ahead. He saw the blonde lady, still alive and moving her lips, as he desperately tried to rescue her from the debris. Leaning closer, he heard her last, weak words and knew it was Princess Diana. Hours later, Gourmelon, who thought she might survive, was devastated by her death. He was borne the weight of that moment for over 3 decades, eventually disclosing the painful truth of Princess Diana's dying moments and the enormous effect of her mythological life and untimely death in recent years. The mishap. Gourmelon hurried to the Pont de l'Alma underpass with 9 other firefighters to assist the victims of the tragic collision. The Mercedes-Benz W140 involved in the collision had its front completely destroyed. The guys peered inside and saw that one of its inhabitants looked to have passed away. Gourmelon had a look around. Searching the opulent bar, he looked for anybody else he could rescue. Then he saw a young blonde lady inside with his eyes. It seemed as if she was still breathing, although very little. Come to the fore. The blonde was in reasonably stable condition when Gourmelon managed to remove her from the automobile, so he was shocked to hear that she had died in the hospital. He didn't know who she was when he cared for her. He was just focused on ensuring she lived through that crucial time. He was even more surprised when he subsequently learned that the young lady he had rescued was Diana, Princess of Wales. However, there was more to the story. She mumbled something to him as he helped her out of the vehicle, and he concealed such remarks for 20 years. Diana's predestined path. Lady Diana Spencer was raised in an aristocratic household and was introduced to the royal family at a young age. She spent her early years spending time with the kingdom's aristocracy, since her family resided close to Sandringham House. Spencer, however, wasn't as lucky academically, but she eventually made up for it by accepting several low-paying jobs in London. Diana, however, was destined for a more distinguished destiny. Her life took an intriguing turn at the age of 16 that would alter her family's financial situation and her lifestyle for all time. Wedding bells. Diana maintained her modesty and shyness as she grew older, but attractively. Charles, Prince of Wales, was drawn to her elegant demeanor. Charles was dating Diana's elder sister, Sarah, back then, but the prince and Diana quickly developed a romantic connection. On July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral, the pair were married in a lavish ceremony that was televised globally. Watching the Prince of Wales and Diana exchange vows at St. Paul's Cathedral drew an estimated 750 million viewers worldwide. Unfortunately, this couple's happily ever after was not what fairy tales are about. The center of interest. As a British royal family member, Diana had to live up to strict standards and regulations that did not suit her quiet and modest disposition. Diana thought that marrying a prince was the nicest thing that could have happened to her, but the marriage quickly proved difficult, particularly once she found out she was expecting a child. Diana's inward emptiness was mostly caused by her belief that she was unworthy of her new status as a princess. Diana was overwhelmed by the media and photographers all over her, following her everywhere and even releasing pictures of her and her family at what were meant to be private and personal times. But as the years passed, she soon realized that there would be other negative aspects to her life besides the strain of always being in the spotlight. Covertly. The public saw Prince Charles's family as a happy, idealized brood. However, their marriage was collapsing, and it was a turbulent affair, very literally, on the other side of the royal walls. Diana was said to have had eating disorders and periods of mental breakdowns, and it was subsequently discovered that she had cheated on Charles as well. Diana struggled to maintain a cheerful attitude for her public persona, but it's generally accepted that Charles' very public and revived romance with his former passion, Camilla Parker Bowles, was the last straw in their marriage, since it was done without consideration for Diana's sentiments. Photographer exposes her sadness. Following the couple's idyllic nuptials, the media trailed them about to document the apparent delight of marriage. Out of all the pictures, one caught Diana's tears. The photographer, Lennox, has now disclosed the real narrative surrounding that tragic incident. The image was humorously labeled by the media as a response to roses that the audience threw at her head. Decades later, Lennox said he was informed it was only heat and jet lag, despite his claims that Diana burst into tears and wept for a couple of minutes. However, he said, "I don't think Charles has noticed Diana crying at that point. It was the first indication that something was wrong, and if he had, it's characteristic of Prince Charles to turn a blind eye. It was the first of many." An open interview that startled everyone. Diana famously said in a 1995 interview with journalist Martin Bashir that there were 3 of us in this marriage, referring to Charles' relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. She also talked candidly about her struggles with bulimia and depression, emphasizing the lack of support she faced when seeking help. The interview marked a turning point in her marriage to Charles and resulted in the subsequent years' finalization of their divorce. While many viewers showed great sympathy for Diana, her sons, William and Harry, were reported to be extremely upset with her for disclosing the family's private issues so publicly. Different ways. Diana's marriage to Charles irreversibly broke down just over 10 years after their wedding of the century, which broke in 1992 and was eventually finalized in 1996. Fans were devastated, and it was said that Diana suffered more from the divorce than Prince Charles. Diana withdrew from public life, claiming to have very few true friends in her life, according to a tabloid reporter. Fortunately, Diana's love life flourished after her separation from Charles. Outrageous matters. The princess was reportedly surrounded by a horde of suitors when she was still young and attractive. It was also reported that she had affairs with men like her bodyguard, Paul Manakee, and cavalryman James Hewitt during her marriage. Finally, it was revealed that she had to end her relationship with her childhood friend, James Gilby, a car dealer, after their phone conversations became public, and he called her Squidgy. Needless to say, the media went crazy over that particular tale. Within closed doors. The princess's life seemed restored when British-Pakistani heart surgeon Hasnat Khan entered her life. Their romance remained a closely guarded secret as Diana looked for a way to live away from the spotlight. She confided in friends that she had never met anyone quite like Khan. The princess was utterly enthralled with the surgeon when she first saw him while visiting London's Royal Brompton Hospital with a friend. Over my head. Vanity Fair also claims that Khan and Diana's romance progressed to the point where they began discussing marriage, despite the princess's attempts to get him to agree to a private ceremony. Hasnat, who never liked the attention that came with dating the most famous person in the world, suggested that they move to Pakistan, where they would be free from media interference in their personal lives. Diana reportedly gave the idea some serious thought. Almost wed. In addition, the princess supposedly confided in her close friend Irman Khan, Pakistan's former prime minister, about her feelings for Hasnat. Khan later said that his conversations with her convinced him that she was in love with Hasnat, but eventually the relationship began to fall apart. Despite this new development, Diana persisted in her timeless pursuit of causes she believed in, attending the English National Ballet and visiting Mother Teresa before appearing on the cover of Vanity Fair in 1997. Someone fresh. That very month, Diana accepted the invitation from Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed to take a vacation in Saint-Tropez, south of France. Al Fayed had first met Diana and Prince Charles at a polo match in July 1986. Diana traveled to the billionaire's villa with her sons, Princes William and Harry. Then rumors circulated that Diana had fallen in love with Al Fayed's son, Dodi. Contemporary romance. The People's Princess and her family were still under constant media scrutiny, even while vacationing in France. She was followed by paparazzi, and many people are still reminded of the front-page news pictures of her kissing Dodi aboard the Al-Fayed family yacht. Later, during an impromptu press conference, Diana promised the reporters that she would surprise them with her next move. Little did she know, though, that her statement would be eerily prescient. Dodi Al-Fayed. Dodi, the eldest son who had grown up in affluence but also made a name for himself as a movie producer with credits on Hook, Chariots of Fire, and The Scarlet Letter, is said to have admired the princess from afar and had his sights set on her long before his father invited her on a luxury trip to France. Princess Diana and Dodi's relationship grew stronger in the weeks before their tragic deaths. It's finished. Returning to London, Diana ended her 2-year engagement with Hasnat Khan, whom she had previously called Mr. Wonderful, as he later reported to the police. Khan did not hold the Egyptian businessman in high regard and informed the princess that he felt the new affair would ultimately cause her pain. Despite her heartbreak that she and Khan had not clicked, Diana had already decided about Dodi. Over my head. Dodi is obviously in love with Diana, even though he's engaged to American model Kelly Fisher at the time. It seems he bombarded the princess with costly gifts such as exotic tropical fruits, a Cartier watch, and flowers that filled her entire room to let her know he was serious about her. When Diana finally agreed to start dating him, Dodi responds positively to his declarations of love. Before dating Diana, Dodi had established himself as a harmless playboy and was well known to have dated several celebrities, including Brooke Shields and Julia Roberts. Rumors of an engagement. As the summer of 1997 drew close, opinions about the depth of the relationship between Diana and Dodi varied. For example, Vanity Fair reported that Dodi planned to purchase a ring for the princess, even though the princess had informed her close friend Rosa Monckton that she planned to wear the ring on a finger on her right hand and that Diana was merely trying to make Khan jealous. On the other hand, Dodi's father was adamant that the ring was intended to signify the couple's engagement. Joyful times. Whatever the truth about the circumstances, Diana and Dodi were happy to spend time together, and at the end of July 1997, they decided to take a cruise to Sardinia. However, being the world's sexiest couple meant the paparazzi were always on their tail. In August of that same year, Diana attended an anti-landmine event in Bosnia, where pictures of her and Dodi cuddling on his yacht appeared on newsstands. All set to take the next action. The pair was back in France at the end of the month following their wonderful vacation in Sardinia. This time, they chose to visit the city of Paris, checking out the Hotel Ritz owned by Dodi's father. In 2019, the Daily Mirror reported that whilst Diana remained in their suite, Dodi headed out to a jeweler to secure the ring the princess was anticipating. Then, on the night of August 30th, 1997, they decided to eat out at the extravagant Benoit restaurant. Paparazzi conflict. Although the couple had planned an intimate dinner together, the paparazzi threatened to ruin their night out. As they hit the road to Benoit, they were followed by about 30 photographers. So the pair made a U-turn back to the Ritz, deciding to dine at the hotel's L'Espadon restaurant instead. But as they settled down to their meal, Dodi became concerned that some guests around them were paparazzi. This left him and Diana with no alternative but to return to their suite. Being followed. After dinner, Diana and Dodi decided to spend the rest of the evening in his opulent apartment on the Rue Arsène José. However, they were confronted with another pressing issue. The paparazzi had followed the couple since they left the Ritz earlier that evening, and they were almost positive that photographers were waiting to take action. Ultimately, they devised what can only be described as a grand scheme. A basic scheme. The plan involved Henri Paul, the deputy head of security of the hotel. Although it was his night off, Paul was called back in to drive Dodi, the princess, and her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, to Dodi's apartment. 2 decoy cars would leave from the hotel's main entrance to fool the paparazzi, while Paul and the others would exit through the back in a hired black Mercedes-Benz. This wall took place in the early hours of August 31st, 1997. Not too long after midnight. They all got in the car and Paul zoomed down the road, but the swarm of paparazzi somehow had become aware of the plan and began aggressively tailing the limo. Sitting in front of Paul was Reese Jones. Subsequently, an inquest heard that the paparazzi, who had been goaded by Paul outside the hotel, had attempted to block the vehicle to force Paul to slow down, but their efforts were futile. Rather, the Mercedes proceeded on its journey, traveling at about 65 miles per hour before disaster struck. A sordid evening. The limo continued to blaze down the road. Just 3 minutes after departing the hotel, Paul lost control of the vehicle as he entered the tunnel under Pont de Alma. There were no paparazzi close by at the time who would have been blamed for the mishap, so ultimately the inquest would place the error on Paul. Not only was he driving with so much alcohol in his system that he was more than 3 times over the legal limit, but it was also found that he was under the influence of prescription drugs. The sad accident. The vehicle hit the tunnel wall, swerved left, and with great force rammed into one of the pillars that supported the roof. It was a brutal and fatal crash that claimed Paul's life on the spot. As the mangled remains of the black limo lay in the tunnel, the paparazzi, who had been pursuing the car on motorbikes, arrived at the scene. But they made little effort to help the affected passengers, opting to photograph the wreckage instead. Thankfully, though, someone eventually called emergency services, and a team of firefighters hurried out from the Millar station close by. Rescuers show up. Gormala, the duty officer on that tragic night, headed the team of heroic firefighters. Now, 20 years after his encounter with the victims, he revealed to the Sun exactly what he and his team had discovered. Recalling details about the accident involving the world's most famous couple at the time, Gormala said, "The car was in a mess, and we just dealt with it like any road accident. We got straight to work to see who needed help and who was alive." Assisting the sufferers. In his interview with The Sun, Gormala stated, "When I got to the car, I could see the driver was already dead, and there was nothing that could be done for him. As a seasoned firefighter, the horrific crash he saw was nothing new, so he did what he knew best: analyze the situation and provide help. For me, this was simply a banal traffic incident, one of many that emergency services have to deal with, and it was the usual causes: speed and a drunk driver," Gormala continued. Hope. Dodi's fate in the backseat of the limo was unfortunately not much better. While still inside, he had suffered a heart attack. Gormala was no stranger to such traumas, and Dodi's situation did not look good. He did not survive and passed away shortly after impact. Paramedics declared his time of death once he'd been extracted from the vehicle. Fortunately, bodyguard Reese Jones was spared. Despite suffering multiple serious facial injuries, he managed to recover. The bodyguard of the princess. Even though he was in great danger, Reese Jones' major concern was Diana. In a state of panic, he repeatedly asked for the princess. Gormala recalled, "He kept asking for the princess, crying, 'Where is she? Where is she?' But my team told him to keep calm and not speak. I told him that none of my men spoke English, so it was better for him to stay and not move. I told him not to worry, we were looking after everyone," he added. This advice may have been the thing to save Reese Jones's life, as despite his extensive injuries, including breaking every bone in his face, that required doctors to use family photos as references to rebuild his looks with 150 titanium plates, in 10 days in a coma, he would be the only survivor. Now head of security for AstraZeneca, he published The Bodyguard's story, Diana, the crash, and the sole survivor in 2000, and was then involved in lawsuits with Dodi's father, who said he put intense pressure on him to remember the events of that fateful night. Diana Spencer. In the meantime, Gormala took care of Diana, but at the time he had no idea who she was and identified her as the mystery blonde woman. The princess was lying on the floor in the car's back seat. She was conscious and her eyes were open, so the hero firefighter felt she would be all right. Diana was also reportedly able to make some small movements. But despite her state, crucial seconds were ticking by, and she needed to be moved to a hospital immediately. The Princess of Wales. Diana took hold of Gormalone's hand as he prepared to take her out of the limo. And during that entire time, he had no idea that he was caring for the Princess of Wales. In an interview with the newspaper, he later disclosed this to The Sun, saying, "It wasn't until after she was placed in the ambulance that one of the paramedics told me it was Princess Diana." The firefighter also shared her terrifying words to him that evening. The phrases. While Gormalone cared for the princess, ensuring she didn't suffer any more harm, she uttered some words to him that may have been her last words she ever spoke. Apparently, in shock at the mess of the wrecked car, she reportedly said to the man who had rescued her, "My God, what's happened?" Although Gormalone did not disclose in his interview whether he ever replied to the princess, he spoke about what happened to her next. Preserving a life. Diana was certainly in good hands with Gormala and the rest of the first responders as they worked tirelessly to save her and Rhys Jones after the horrific ordeal. But given the circumstances, there was only so much they could do. Gormalone said, "I gave Diana some oxygen, and my team and I stayed by her side as she was taken out of the car. It was quick because we didn't have to cut any wreckage. But sadly, as she was placed on a stretcher, she suffered a heart attack." Heart stopped. Diana, who had been sitting in the right back passenger seat when the crash occurred, was reported to have had no visible serious injuries. But the nightmare wasn't over for the princess. She went into cardiac arrest at about 1 a.m., so Gormala quickly gave her aid. At first, it appeared to work. He said in his interview, "I massaged her heart, and a few seconds later, she started breathing again. It was a relief, of course, because as a first responder, you want to save lives, and that's what I thought I had done." No visible major injury. Despite the severity of the crash, Gormala was confident Diana would be okay once her heart began to beat again because, among other things, he could see that she was not bleeding. He disclosed, "I could see she had a slight injury to her right shoulder, but other than that, there was nothing significant." The firefighter could only see a small cut on Diana's right shoulder, suggesting that there was no blood on her at all. Afterward, Gormala and his group may have believed they had successfully shielded Diana from further harm, but they had no idea that the worst was still to come. It seemed like she would make it. Gormala told The Sun, "To be honest, I thought she would live. But it would be hours after the devastating crash and Diana's transportation to the hospital that he would receive news that not only shocked him but also rocked the entire world." Hopes were high when Diana was being moved into the emergency vehicle. She appeared stable and was ready to meet the best hands at Petrie Sepulchre Hospital. Hospital treatment. When the ambulance pulled up to the hospital just after 2 a.m., doctors raced against the clock to try to save Diana's life. They had to perform multiple attempts at resuscitation before they could declare her dead. Diana, Princess of Wales, died from her wounds. Her injuries included a severe pulmonary vein, which caused internal bleeding, and a ruptured blood vessel near her heart. Her damage was subtle but significant. Regrettably, the night wasn't over for Gormala. Princess Diana has passed away. Sadly, the princess passed away at around 4 a.m. on August 31st, 1997. Gormala, working a double weekend shift, remembered how he immediately called his wife to tell her what had happened that night. "My wife was asleep, and I told her about the accident and Princess Diana. I said that she'd suffered a cardiac arrest, but I'd managed to revive her," the lead firefighter said after Diana had been taken to the hospital. The 20-year-old mystery. Princess Diana, affectionately known as the People's Princess, passed away on August 31st, 1997. Her death shocked the world and was followed by an unprecedented public outpouring of grief. Back in France, Gormala remembered the events of that fateful night in August and did not speak about the tragedy until 20 years later when he was no longer employed by the fire department. In an interview with The Sun, the brave firefighter remarked, "I can still picture the whole scene. I'll never forget and always think about it this time of year." Princess Diana's final words were, "My God, what has happened?" Diana passed away in the hospital a few hours after the accident. Despite attempts to save her life, according to Gormala's statement in interviews, although she was cognizant and aware immediately after the accident. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon